Hey everybody, welcome to Workforce Gaming. I'm Brad, here with Doug.
Hey.
Doug just finished up Death's Door,
Mm-hmm.
which I feel like is kind of this year's Hades, where it's this kind of weird little indie thing that every like 3 or 4 weeks somebody brings up somewhere.
It's is it this year's Hades? It would have
I
been
mean,
this
not
year's Hades.
not
No, no, no.
quality wise.
No,
I'm
I
just
get what you
talking
mean.
about in like the way that it's like kind of like moved through like the conversation this year.
Sure, yeah. And honestly, I think it would be this year's Hades if Hades didn't happen, because it shares a lot with Hades, to the point where if you like Hades, just right off the bat, you're gonna like Death's Door. I'd say it's not as good as Hades, but Hades is a hard bar to pass.
Yeah.
I wouldn't put too much on it. Yeah, no, it's cool. It's one I heard about a little bit. It's by the guys who did this game called Titan Souls, which I enjoyed the concept of, but was not a huge fan of, which was basically like a boss rush mode with a bunch of cool bosses, but it was
Yep.
stupid hard.
It's one of
Which
those
actually,
weird games that everybody got for PS Vita. And
yeah,
everything. I have a Vita. Why not? It's on PS Plus. I'll try that. Nope.
yeah. It was a cool game. It was a cool idea, but it was just really really hard. So going to Death's Door, I was like, all right. I actually was expecting this to be like Dark Souls hard,
Yeah.
but it's not, thankfully. Well, not thankfully, but it's not that hard. Um, Death's Door is a very good game. It does a lot of things very good, but it never quite reaches that like level of greatness. There's like when I was thinking of like typing out things like what are the things like I love about Death's Door. I love the setting. Everything else is very good. So Death's Door is a top-down action game. If you're familiar with Hades, I think that's probably the easiest thing to point to from now on with any sort of top-down action
Yeah.
game. Um, it's pretty similar to like old school 2D Zelda games. So it's
That's a
you're in
good thing.
large overworld map. You go to a dungeon. At the end of the dungeon, there's a boss. You got three bosses, and then you got some bosses at the end, and it's just a very video game as video game. But the thing that I really liked was the one thing I was saying that the thing I loved, and that's the thing I want to start with, is the setting. And one of the things I was thinking about, like the second I booted up, there's just like this immediate charm and interesting setting that I was just immediately into. As soon as I started playing, I was like, this was a good purchase, like just right off the bat. And so the reason I like it so much, it's got a really unique setting. And what it is, you play a crow who acts essentially as like a grim reaper of sorts. So at your job, it's this kind of like this bureaucracy of like where you're given a job to go kill something, go reap its soul, and then just return the soul back to your organization. I don't remember what the organization's called. I don't know if it's ever actually given a name. But the thing that's happening is like there's something kind of going on in the world that you're not quite sure. So like this place would usually be busy with tons of people doing paperwork and stuff, but there's like two guys now doing paperwork. There's a bunch of empty desks, and there's like one guy at the head, and nobody quite knows what's going on, or like where did everybody go? Why is nobody working? And like people just like aren't returning souls, and it's a very weird thing that's kind of going on. So you go out, your first big soul is a big boss, and just as you're about to get all your experience points, this huge crow comes in who also works for the agency, knocks you out, steals the soul, and and takes it to this thing called Death's Door. So I just thought the setting was like just immediately just very very cool. Of just like playing as a crow is just kind of a fun idea. Aging bureaucracy stuff is really fun. I think especially like since Control kind of like turned me on
Yeah.
that sort of idea of just like weird bureaucracy stuff of like an agency that does something kind of odd, but they have their own rules and regulations.
Yeah.
And the graphics are really cool. I really enjoy them. They're low poly, but they don't do the crunchiness of PlayStation 1. It's just a very clean, low poly world that just looks great.
Yeah.
It's really fun to be in. It's got cool monster design and that sort of thing. And I really did like the story. I think at the end, once they kind of, why did this guy steal the soul from you? What the hell's going on, sort of thing. I think the story was really, really cool. The only thing I didn't quite like about that, though, is that they do a lot of good story stuff at the beginning, and there are maybe one story beat before the end. So it's like big upfront stuff that's like really cool, really sucks you in this world. Like, okay, what's going on? That's like end of the game. Here's what's going on.
So it's all universe. So basically, I guess what I'm getting is that it's mostly universe building that's really cool about this, not the overall
Yes.
plot line. So you get the big universe building. Again, having not played this, I'm assuming you get kind of that like go do this thing tag, and then 5 hours later, and we're back. You did the thing, yay!
Yeah, so kind of like the setup what I was saying. So the guy, like, he steals that soul, he brings this thing called the Death's Door, and he tells you, he's like, "Hey, I stole this soul from you. I know it's your job to get this soul back, and I'll give you this soul back if you help me open this door. Um,
Okay,
and to open this door, you need to go kill 3 bosses."
gotcha. So the game actually isn't working for the bureaucracy. The game is trying to essentially get back at this dude for stealing your soul and trying to earn it back from
Yeah,
him.
to earn it back so you can like go
Gotcha.
turn it in
Okay.
at your job. So like you're just trying not to get fired, which is kind of just fun, which is just kind of a fun thing.
Is it humorous then with all of that? Because that sounds. I mean, it's a humorous situation. Does there humor in it? Is it? Because I guess the thing again,
It's
not to keep dwelling back on Hades, but Hades had so much personality and charm and kind of that type of attitude. Does this have
yeah.
that same feeling?
No, it's definitely not a funny game. It's is it a funny game? That's an interesting
I mean,
question.
funny's too hard. I guess what I'm saying is, are they aware that the situation's goofy? Like, I'm gonna get fired if I don't get this damn soul. Like,
Yeah, it's like a little quirky. It's definitely like quirky for sure. Like
quirky's a better
I
word.
would say like kind of like older Zelda games. Like I would say the newer Zelda games are like a little serious, but
Yep.
it's kind of like it's not taking itself too seriously. But and that's kind of where I like games to kind of like sit is where it takes its world seriously. So, but the world's like a little off kilter, like a little wacky. Like the character's like a little silly. There's
Yeah.
definitely some acknowledgement. The character's like one of the characters you meet is a guy whose head was turned to a pot full of soup. So it's not like it's not the most serious game. But the thing that's
Okay.
nice that kind of hovers in this thing where it's like, here's odd things that happen in this world, but we're going to take this world seriously. Is that when like, especially at the end, I think the end is like just so good. It's like kicking up because then it turns serious and it doesn't feel like such a turn,
Yep.
but you're just like, you're now invested in this world, and then it kind of kicks up to the end, which is cool. I would say there's like some funny bits, but it's definitely not laugh out loud. Actually, I think one of the main things, because it actually deals a lot with death, is it's a very melancholy game. It has this sort of like melancholiness. Actually, the way that the world you walk through, it feels very similar to, say, Ico or Shadow of the Colossus,
Okay.
where it's this kind of like loneliness to it. It's like a lot
Yep.
of like just dust blowing. Like there's enemies out there. It's not totally barren, but definitely you feel alone in this world as you're wandering, which is like a fun feeling, which I think a lot of games don't really do that. They don't like. There's not a lot of games I feel like are desolate. There's games that feel empty, like just because, not necessarily on purpose.
Accidentally give you that feeling.
Yeah, exactly. And I said, and this one, it was nice. It was nice, kind of feeling that desolate. And the boss battles are really, really good. I really enjoyed them, and they do kind of a fun thing with the dungeons. Is that so there's 3 dungeons, 3 bosses.
Yep.
Pretty simple stuff. But as you're going through the dungeons, you'll meet the boss who's like, "What are you doing here?" Or they'll taunt you or something like that.
Yeah.
So like there'll be like periods, like 3 or 4 periods, like before you get to the boss, where you've already met the boss. So
Okay.
it's this nice sort of like not ratcheting up or anything like that, but it's kind of, I always neat that I was like when you get an idea of who you're gonna fight before you fight them.
Yes.
So your dungeon that took like 2 hours long, maybe you met the boss like 2 or 3 times. So when you finally meet them, it's kind of like it's this nice conversation. Your character doesn't talk, but it's like a nice kind of like, okay, now I at least have context for this character.
I understand why I need to beat the shit out of you.
Yeah, exactly. And they do something that I think is super clever. And I'm going to say maybe a little spoilery because it's after, you won't notice until after the first boss battle. So it does deal with death. So you actually do kill the bosses. And what happens is after you kill a boss, there is a character who's a gravedigger, and he comes out, and actually they have like a funeral service for them.
Oh, weird.
It's really strange. So like the boss will be like kind of like in the middle of the arena with like their arms crossed at their chest, and the gravedigger is like there. He's like, "Oh, do you want to say a few words or something like that?" And they'll have like another character for like the dungeon as well, who like is there and says a few words for the character. So it's a neat game because it's got that kind of like loneliness, kind of that like melancholiness with like a little bit of like kind of offbeat characters. And then it's just got really, really good, solid action gameplay on top of it. So it felt like, oh, this is just a very good game. It was really fun to play. And I don't know why at the end I didn't feel like I loved it so much. I loved that setting. But actually, the one thing that really did bug me, it was just, this is going to be such a dumb pet peeve. It's a big game, but it doesn't have great enemy variety, which, like, the level, like, you
How
spend a
long
lot
is
of...
it?
Ugh.
About
Not-
estimate, like above or below 10 hours.
I probably like 12, maybe
I say, I
maybe
feel
about,
like I feel like if you're over 10, you need good enemy variety, regardless
Well,
of genre, regardless of anything.
yeah, well, what happens is in the first few dungeons they introduce a lot of cool enemies, but then like the rate at which they introduce new enemies slows down like to a crawl by the end. So you're only
Okay.
getting like in like 4 hours you're getting like two new enemies, and the rest are just enemies you've already fought before. Well, in the
Yeah.
beginning you meet a lot of new enemies, and I understand that's like but you go to a lot of unique environments, so it's weird that the enemies aren't switching up as much as the environments were. So
Hmm.
you feel like you're on this grand adventure, but for whatever reason, it feels like a lot of the enemies are kind of repeated at the end. They are fun to fight, but there was once you know how to fight them, the fights aren't nearly as
Yeah.
interesting. That's why the boss battles, I think that's actually one of the reasons I think the boss battles come off as so cool, because they're so unique. So after fighting a bunch of enemies that kind of felt the same, once you get to a boss battle, we're like, oh, this is something I've never seen before. It's a lot more exciting and fun as a result
For
on
sure.
those boss battles. But this is one of those games though, like if there's a Death Door 2, which I'm very excited for. I'm excited for the idea of a Death Door 2 because it ends. It's a pretty very conclusive ending, but definitely there's more to this world than you're expecting kind of
Yeah.
thing. And I think it does sort too if they just fixed it a little bit. This game only needs like a little bit of fixing to be amazing. And honestly, I think the biggest thing with me was the enemy variety, because it just felt a little long at the end. But if they can fix that for a sequel, this game's gonna be like absolutely amazing. And I'd like strongly recommend playing it if you want like a top down action game. If you liked Hades, you're gonna like this one. Not as hard, definitely more Zelda like, but just a really good game.
Nice. Difficulty. So, just because you mentioned Hades Souls, not on that level, more in line with old school Zelda.
I I would say it's a challenging game, but I would not call it a hard game if that makes sense. Like it's nowhere near Souls or Hades or anything like that. There's no
No,
punishment
not
for.
a. I was saying not a roguelike, right?
No. It's Zelda. I mean, it's Zelda. You
Yeah.
go to
Okay.
dungeons. There's no repeating and that sort of thing. I don't think there's not even a punishment for dying. It
Good
definitely is.
checkpoints.
Uh, that's where they do mess with the difficulty a little bit. So they do is they do bonfire checkpoints. They do very
Yep.
similar to bonfire checkpoints. So what it is, like the checkpoint is actually a door that leads you directly back to the bureaucracy area.
Yep.
So by the end, it's actually kind of cool. Your bureaucratic area actually fills with doors that are like warps to different
Oh, all the
areas.
different places. Yeah.
Yeah, but there are definitely some times, especially near the end, where like where you die, you're like, oh fuck, how do I get back to this place from my last
Gotcha.
checkpoint? So that can be hard. And the bosses, there's one boss that is extremely hard. That is not the final boss. And I really thought like, oh no, I don't think I can beat this, because I think it's only really hard because I think the rest of the game is not as hard as that boss. And it was
Yeah.
funny. I was actually after I finished this game, I wanted to like listen to a few of like the making of stuff of this, and they actually called it that boss like specifically as like people are having trouble with this one. I was like, yeah, I can see why. Because none of your game leading up to this point was nearly as difficult. Yeah, to the point where I'm surprised they haven't like fixed it in a patch or something. But regardless, it's not a hard game. It's definitely a challenging game. So if you like a challenge, I think if you're into easy games, I wouldn't recommend it.
Yeah.
It's definitely harder than Zelda, but it's nothing. It's not nothing to sneeze at, but it's nowhere near Souls or something. But I would say actually, I think one of the things in those I had, it's like if you want to kind of get the feel of a Souls, I think it has a lot of that good emotion and feeling of a Souls
Okay.
without that difficulty. So yeah, just a cool game.
Nice. Well, we are Workforce Gaming. You can follow us on Twitter at Workforce Gaming. Subscribe to us wherever you're listening, and we will see you later.
Bye.